Well, welcome everybody. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on traditional Aboriginal lands across the country and pay my respects to elders, past, present and emerging. Sovereignty was never ceded. Welcome everybody today to today's session, which launches our activities for Bluestocking Week. Bluestocking Week's themes this year is Take Action for Equity. This theme is an initiative of our Women's Action Committee and supported by the NTEU Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island Policy Committee and the NTEU Queer Unionist Tertiary Education Committee. The 2021 theme for Bluestocking Week, Take Action for Equity, draws upon the feminist roots of Bluestocking Week. And while we celebrate the achievements of women in tertiary education, we're also acknowledging that we need to continue the fight for equity. This is a call for the university community to take action for equity and to organise around equity, whether that be building delegates networks, building networks of your friends and workmates, or highlighting a particular issue through events and organising activity, or through support for local bargaining claims, where we look at those through an equity lens. Today, we're going to be joined by Theresa Parkinson, Employer Partnership Manager with UniSuper, who's going to talk to us today about women and superannuation. The equity theme is to look at financial security for women in retirement and what we need to do to ensure that we are financially prepared. Theresa's going to provide a brief overview of the financial challenges that women face and the steps we can take to help gain control of our finances and the strategies we can use to increase our super balances. Theresa has worked in financial services for over 42 years, working across all states of Australia in roles ranging from local retail banking through to leading national teams. She's passionate about educating people about money and in particular, the unique challenges that are faced by women when it comes to their finances. After Theresa's presentation, we're going to have the opportunity to ask her questions in a 15-minute question and answer. If possible, could you keep your questions short and to the point so we can allow as many people to speak as possible? As this is a big group, we're going to mute all microphones while Theresa is speaking to ensure that she can be heard. During the Q&A, if you want to ask a question, please use the raise hand function in Zoom down the bottom of your screen, and I'll put you on the speaking list. If you're called to speak, please make sure your microphone is on. Well, thanks everyone, and over to you, Theresa.
Thank you so much for that very warm welcome. And I'd just like to welcome everyone too. I'm pretty impressed actually with such a large turn up. So I'm guessing that says that you're all already taking some action to make some changes to your financial situation, which is really pleasing to see. So I also would like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of country on which we meet and sincerely pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Now, I thought with the subject today that we would actually start with a bit of a personal story. So I'd like to share my story. So if we talk about equity for women, or we could perhaps talk about the lack of it, there's a lot of conversation in the media about all of the gender gap in terms of salaries, and of course, the big gap in superannuation balances when people are retiring. So this is a topic that's really close to my heart. So I thought I'd just share with you that it was the late 70s. I started my first job. I'm a girl from Tasmania, so was in a small bank in Tassie, pretty excited to be starting work. Now, first of all, I started and I was told that I could not join the bank's superannuation scheme, that was only for men. Lucky me, I was going to have a husband to take care of me when I retired. And that meant that I didn't need to join a super fund. It just wasn't appropriate for women at all. Now, secondly, as I worked through my career, I started to show signs of leadership, considered to be an excellent employee, and considered for promotional opportunities. Now, those promotions were very short-lived. As soon as my branch manager sat me down, asked what my thoughts were about having babies, getting married, all of those sorts of questions. And of course, I wanted to actually take up those options as I got a little bit older. I was told that I wouldn't be considered for promotion. So hence promotion and any pay rises that would come from those promotions were denied. Well, I did marry, and apparently my financial future was now secure. I had 2 sons and had to resign from work because I had no parental leave available to me at that time. But thankfully, I still had my finance backer, my husband, so I was going to be fine. So I was out of the workforce for about 4 years. Now, I know this isn't a unique story. There are a lot of people on the line here today who have experienced very similar starts, I guess, to their career. Now, 9 years into my marriage, my retirement plan, it was all over. So now I was a single mum with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old working part-time as a teller in a credit union. Now, just some context here. This was about the time that the Australian compulsory superannuation scheme commenced in 92-93. Now, when I look back and think about the discrimination that I was experiencing at that time, but it wasn't called discrimination, but look at the opportunities that passed us women by. And they're having an impact still to this day, an impact to our financial futures that we've never been able to recover from because of how long we experienced those impacts. But what's really disappointing for me is that it's still happening. So I'd like to just share my screen now and just show you some slides. Bear with me. I don't normally use Zoom. So when I said that this is still happening today, this is a slide that's got recent stats on the financial challenges that women are facing. So our superannuation system is intrinsically linked to earnings. So it's a twofold issue. There's the pay gap issue, and then there's the time that women spend either in the workforce or indeed working part-time after having career breaks. KPMG released a report, and can you believe this? This was just in August, so we're talking in weeks. They released a report that said Australian women are still retiring with between 22 and 35% less than their male colleagues. Women on average, however, live longer than men. So this puts women at a much higher risk of poverty as they age. And it's now widely commentated, as I'm sure you're aware, that women over 50 are actually the fastest growing demographic of becoming homeless. So all of these things are just compounding. Now, I try to make sessions as interactive as possible. It's a bit difficult with the virtual technology that we have, but I want to actually ask I usually ask these questions face to face, but I want to ask these and just to get you thinking about, as we pace through the what you can do, thinking about these questions and how they relate to you. So do you manage your money, or does your money manage you? In other words, is your lifestyle dependent on your finances and the money coming in, or are you managing it to live the life you want to live? Are you actively involved in your household finances, or is that left to someone else? Do you know how your superannuation is structured? Do you ever open the statement? Do you ever have a look at how it's set up? And has it been more than, let's say, 2 years? It's something I do every year, but has it been more than 2 years since you shopped your bills? Just did some comparisons, checked on what interest rates you're paying, because these are all things that you can actually start to do straight away. And as I work through the session today, let those sort of questions come back to you and think about the way you approach your financial circumstances. So here's just some top tips, I guess, of how to take control of your finances. Financial literacy in Australia, unfortunately, is very low. Now, did I hear someone say there was someone on the line from, oh no, I've got a Griffith professor, Professor Ross Guest, and he actually said that it's time to treat finance literacy like a public health crisis, because financial health is just as serious as physical and psychological health. So we need to start taking whatever steps are necessary for you and the gaps you have, because knowledge is power. Obviously, coming along to sessions like this is a great step. But start setting financial ambitions or goals and actually stick to them. And it could be as simple as just putting 10% of your income away each pay. It might be paying off a particular debt, but set goals and stick to them. I'm sure all of you have heard of the barefoot investor. Schedule time to manage your money. He talks about the date night, I think he calls it, where families or couples, especially if there's a couple in a household managing money, get together and discuss how things are tracking to their financial goals and plans. But the other thing that I think happens to a lot of women especially is they leave the financial management to someone else in their household and they don't actually get involved in their finances. They don't even know how they're tracking financially. If you are one of those people, start to get involved with your finances. It should be how many other people are responsible for finances in a household. Whether you're bringing money to that household or not, if you are a major part of that household, get involved. Know your super. I'm going to spend a fair bit on super, so I won't delve into that too much at the moment. But we really do need to get involved and active with our super. And lastly, debt. Use it wisely. None of us could probably buy a house or a car without using debt, but think about when you're entering debt. Is it affordable? Is it the right time? You know, interest rates are really low at the moment. Have you actually done something about moving from a higher interest rate product to a lower interest rate product to free up your cash, your money, instead of paying it to institutions to just increase their profits, shall we say? I'm not going to spend too much time on this slide, but I put this here in the context of managing money. We call this the 50-20-30 or the 50-30-20. I call it the 3 Fs: fixed, future, and fun. Now, I'm not saying that you need to make sure that your budget matches what is on the screen in front of you, being 50% fixed, 20% future, or 30% fun. What I am saying is, if you don't know what percentage of your income is going to fixed expenses, and there's some of those fixed items there. If you aren't putting anything aside for the future, and I hate to say this, but most people aren't, then you are never going to be able to really take control of your finances. Your finances will be managing you. So I would implore all of you, if you take no action from this session other than this, just take the time to work out what percentage of your household income is going to each of these categories. And it gives you something to work towards. Now, obviously, if your fixed expenses are more than 50%, and many of you will be there, I hate to say this, but it's the fun one that it has to come off first. But please start thinking about future. Future is where, when those things happen, we all remember when COVID hit, none of us saw that coming, and the financial impact that that had to people without having something away for their future. So this is that emergency fund, or it could be some salary sacrifice for your retirement, but it's about paying down debt. But please just take some time to actually consider where you're at in terms of your fixed, future, and fun expenses. All right, let's talk about super. So superannuation, obviously I work for UniSuper, and I'm guessing many of you on the line are members of UniSuper. But I wanted to focus here on steps that you can take to implement to close the gap or build momentum if you feel that your super is tracking along okay. So these are going to be practical steps that you can take, but remembering that your super gives you lifestyle choices. If you take some time now to increase your super, in retirement, you're going to be able to choose what sort of lifestyle you're going to have in retirement. But before we know that, the age-old question, how much is enough? Let me tell you, you don't have to have $1 million to retire. You don't even have to have close to it. It just depends on the type of retirement that you want. So this table here represents the Association of Super Funds. We call them ASFA. This represents their retirement standard for retirees that are aged 65 to 85. Now, this is at March 2021. Now, these numbers make some assumptions. First of all, that you own your own home, so you're not actually paying rent or mortgage once you're retired, and also that you remain in relatively good health. Now, modest retirement is considered more than the age pension, but still only able to afford basic activities. A comfortable retirement involves a broad range of leisure and recreational activities. It allows you to have a good standard of living through the purchase of such things as household goods, private health insurance, have a reasonable car, good clothes, domestic travel, and even occasional international travel. Now, there's some excellent tools on Money Smart, and also most super funds, including UniSuper's website, actually have tools that you can go in and play and actually input dollars and put scenarios in place to project where your super is going to land, and also then how much you can draw from that by way of, I guess, a regular income once you've retired, to actually make sure that you are tracking for the retirement outcome that you want. Now, knowing that we're talking about gaps and I guess disparity between males and females, there are some things that unfortunately we have to take control of doing by way of increasing our super balances, even though we've got so many employers now that are doing so many things to assist us in that. And one of those that comes to mind is starting to pay super on parental leave, which is great. But there are steps that we need to take. Now, the first one, and probably the most logical one, is to start salary sacrificing. So I'd like to introduce you to Sarah. Now, Sarah's aged 51. She's earning $100,000, but she also realises that as she heads to retirement, that she needs to start doing some salary sacrifice. So she's decided she'll salary sacrifice $10,000 a year. Now, remembering that when you salary sacrifice, the tax treatment is different. So we talk about concessional contributions. Now, the maximum amount that any of us can put into our superannuation in that pre-tax environment, so that favourable tax environment, is $27,500 a year. It just went up to that from the 1st of July. It was $25,000. Now, once we contribute it to super, the tax we pay is only 15% that's taken as it goes into super. If there are any of you here on the line that are in the defined benefit scheme, it works quite differently, and we would have to talk about that in a different session. And I'll talk at the end of this where you can get some support with that. The point here is by salary sacrificing $10,000, Sarah is actually saving $1,950 in tax in that given year, and her super is boosted by $8,500 net, which is the $10,000 less the tax. So Sarah starts to actually see her employer contribution going in, and also the amount that she's salary sacrificing. Now, another thing that's happened and changed, which you may or may not be aware of, and it's probably one of the best legislations I've seen in many years, is they now have created what we call catch-up contributions. So what that means is, if you didn't go to your cap, so let's say in this current financial year, $27,500 can be contributed. If you only had your employer contribution and it was far less than $27,500, you can start catching up, not only this year, but from the last couple of years that there was a gap. So if we go back to look at Sarah, she's currently got $200,000 in her super. Only people with $500,000 or less in super can call on the catch-up concessional contribution. So Sarah's decided that she's going to actually start adding more than her $10,000 a year by using her catch-up. So it leaves her with the ability in the current financial year that we are in the scenario we've created for Sarah, she could contribute up to $44,000. Now, I need to just call out here, I'm not sure about you, but I don't have a spare $44,000 to contribute to super. Now, some of you may not, but I guess the point is whatever you can contribute, along with any compounding interest, is going to make a big difference. But let me just talk about how just the salary sacrifice that Sarah is making, the impact that that has on her super over a 15-year period, is it increases her balance by 136,425. And when I say the balance, I mean the difference between where she was trending and where she was going to end up. And that's a substantial boost to anybody's retirement outcome, especially, you know, at starting at 51. Now, I just mentioned compounding interest. So I just want to sort of talk about the benefits of compound interest. And I want to introduce you to another couple of people, Sue and Ellen. Now, we're going to talk about, I guess, how the time that you start contributing. Sue is actually 25 and Ellen is 40. And I'm just going to minimize that. Now, they both invest and start investing until the age of 60. Now, as you'll see, Sue's actually got an investment time frame of 35 years and Ellen is only 20. Sue's investment starts at $2,000 a year, which is about $38 a week. And Ellen's at $5,000 because she's starting much later. But you'll see that the total amount invested, Sue has only parted with $70,000 of her earnings over that time horizon, and Ellen, $100,000. But look at the difference by the time they reach age 60, by the time that they have been investing and the benefit of compounding interest. We're actually assuming, I guess, an average return here of 8%. Now, I'll just show you what that looks like in a graph. So you can actually see that Sue started back at age 25, being the green, and Ellen started at the blue. Now, I guess one of the big points here is it doesn't matter when you start, it's just making the start, because the benefit of compounding is always going to have that same impact. So whether it be through salary sacrificing or whether it be through some other investment vehicle, it's just getting a start of a small amount regularly in a good return or a good investment, and then sitting back and watching that investment grow. There's some other considerations that I guess you really need to start thinking about. And when I was saying, you know, we don't all have these big sums of money that we can actually contribute, there are things that you can do which will impact the balance of your superannuation. And you need to start checking those things now. And this doesn't take any money being taken from your income whatsoever. Now, the first one is insurance inside super. I recently helped a family member who was paying income protection inside her superannuation. Knowing I worked in this business, she said, my super is not going anywhere. I just don't understand. So we had a look at her statement. Her income protection, due to her age, had been increasing in premiums year on year. So much so that the premium that she was paying now was nearly line ball with the amount that was being contributed by her employer. Now, I'm not advocating that she cancels that insurance, because income protection insurance, depending on your circumstance, can be extremely important. But what it does mean is that maybe there needs to be a strategy of starting to contribute that premium in pre-tax dollars to your superannuation to stop that erosion. But it also means checking to make sure that you're not paying for insurance premiums that A, you don't need, they're no longer of value due to the changing lifestyle and life stages that we all find ourselves in, and also that we may have them in multiple funds. Multiple funds is a major problem in this country. We have people with as many as 6 and 8 superannuation funds. And if you are one of those people, one of the key things you can do that will start growing your super is to consolidate those funds. But I will caution here, please make sure if you are consolidating that you're not losing any insurance covers that you do need, because with pre-existing conditions now, as we get older, you might find that you can't actually get those covers again. But insurance inside super is one of the biggest erosions of your super savings. So please take the time to look at what you have and make adjustments as necessary. The next one is investment options. So we usually join a super fund. It's what I call a set and forget. We are defaulted. In other words, we don't do anything, so we get whatever option that super fund deems as our default option. For UniSuper, that's our balanced option. Now, some of you who may be a bit younger on the line may be pertinent for you to consider going into higher growth options. The old adage, the higher the risk, the higher the rate. So please take care, but it's an option that you could consider. Alternatively, those that are getting closer to wanting to exit the workforce, you should be very aware of your investment options, just to make sure that you're not in a high growth option that may see those swings in the market that, you know, could erode them and might take some time to come back. Although I'm pleased to say they've definitely come back from the dip we saw when COVID hit. And look, the last thing I just want you to consider is fees. So fees are obviously something that can erode your superannuation. Now, UniSuper are thankfully one of the lowest fees within the industry. However, if you do have funds elsewhere, you may be paying much, much higher fees than you need to be paying. And again, consider consolidating your super funds into one fund, so you're only paying one lot of fees. So they're the slides I've got with the, I guess, the strategies that I wanted to share. I also just wanted to let you know, UniSuper members, and indeed if you're not a UniSuper member but would like to consider being one, we are now open to the broader Australian public. We do have on-campus consultants that are based in pretty much most universities across the country. And the booking tool web address is just there on screen. I would really strongly recommend, it's part of being a member, I would really strongly recommend that rather than trying to get through all of this on your own, a 30-minute appointment with our specialist superannuation consultants can certainly add some value and change the trajectory of your superannuation quite markedly just by taking that action. And the last thing I do have to say is everything I've covered here is a general advice. It is certainly not recommending that you go and take steps personally without considering your own personal circumstances before making any changes. So I'd just like to hand back to Alison to see if we've got any questions.
Fantastic. Thanks, Theresa. If you could just take your screen down and I will see.
I will.
I
don't normally use Zoom, so I just pause share. Do I just click? Here we go. It's gone. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Theresa, for that excellent presentation. I looked at that series of questions at the beginning and felt terribly guilty and have subsequently written down the number so I can ring up and get some advice. I better get more on top of these issues. Now, if you have a question for Theresa, if you could use the raise your hand function in the reaction down below, and we'd love to hear from you if you have questions about your about the presentational issues that have arisen. There's some questions emerging in the chat. If I click on the chat, unfortunately, I can't see the raised hand function, but I might try.
I can get the chat up. I've got the chat if you like.
Yeah, fantastic. If you could have a look at the questions in the chat, maybe we could answer some of those.
I'll run.
One question from Helena with her hand up, so we might move to that first.
Absolutely.
Helena, thank you.
Hi, my name is Helena. How are you?
Great.
So my question is actually on behalf of my mum, who is also a member. She received some financial advice from a UniSuper financial advisor, and that advice was meant to last for 12 months. But unfortunately, during that time, the financial advisor was actually not available when she needed them. And my question is there some kind of process process in which they're able to have that advice period extended if the advice is not able to be given. As my understanding is that when you pay for that advice, it's locked in for 12 months with that particular individual.
Look, absolutely, you can have that extended. So what you need to do is approach the advisor. Have you tried to speak to the advisor, Helena?
Definitely,
yeah.
Yes.
And are you having a problem contacting them? Is that what you're saying?
Their response is unsupportive and unhelpful.
Okay. Can I please get your details and you and I can have a chat offline and I can put you in touch with someone to give you the support you need?
Thank you, will do.
Okay,
Thank you.
so if someone could please make sure they email me, Alison or someone email me contact details, and I'll certainly take that on board.
Thank you. I'll send it to Alison now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Next, I've got Karen O'Brien and then Gabe Goody.
Hi, Theresa, thank you.
Hi, Karen.
Really interesting, thanks. Look, I'd like to ask about the UniSuper pension and what it looks like. Is it possible afterwards to still do the pre-options with investments and so on?
Absolutely. So what we do at UniSuper is what we call an in-specie transfer. So what that means is all the shares and everything and the way you've got it invested in its accumulation phase just simply moves across the different product, usually the flexi pension, but it actually owns the same exposure and shares. And at the time that you want to do that, it is really beneficial for you to sit down with one of our team just to check the way you are invested and make sure that that's appropriate for the way, I guess, your risk profile is moving forward as you move into that different life stage, because we all want our money to last as long as possible. So we need to have a think about the risk and the exposure there. And look, that could start again with one of those meetings with our superannuation consultants on campus, and they can certainly guide you and advise you as to how to best or when to start that process as well. So yes, you still have the same investment options.
So you can change them every couple of weeks if you want to. So if you keep an eye on the stock market, for example, and you want to change the options, you can still do that with pension then. That's good.
Yes, you could. The one little disclaimer I'll make, and this is general advice, remember, please be really mindful when you're switching that you do not switch when the market is falling. I know that's really hard for people to hold the line. It is really nerve-wracking and losing sleep. But once the market's falling, you are selling your shares at a low cost. And then to get back in, a lot of people think, oh, now the market's going up, I'll go back in. You're just buying what you sold for more money. So if you hold the course, it's really, really important. If you find that you aren't sleeping at night, you need your risk profile viewed and you need to set your investments so you can sleep at night, okay?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Pam. Thanks a lot.
Lovely.
Thanks, Karen. Gabe Gooding.
Hi, Gabe. I think you're on mute, Gabe. That's
Sorry,
better.
it wouldn't let me unmute. I just wanted to follow up on that question of people like me who are in the defined benefit and what we can do to boost our retirement income.
Yes, look, defined benefit is quite different. And for any of you that are on the line, I anticipate and hope that you've got some understanding of the way that complex product works. 42 years in financial services. When I started at UniSuper, I said to my boss, you've got to be kidding. It's a very complex beast. The only options that you have, Gabe, if you're in the defined benefit, is to, I guess, move monies around in your accumulation. So defined benefit members also have an accumulation component to their account. So you'll notice if you go onto Employer Online, you'll have two balances that are sitting there together. Yeah. So you can still do some contribution into your accumulation if that's what you'd want, especially if in your earlier years of defined benefit membership, a lot of people, of course, dialed down that their member contribution to zero because, you know, we were raising kids and paying off mortgages and those sorts of things, and we needed as much in our pay packet as possible. As those things change, Unfortunately, you can't dial back up the defined benefit contribution, as in your contribution, but you certainly can still salary sacrifice into your accumulation.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Fantastic. Next, we have Michelle Doolan.
Hi, Michelle.
Sorry, was on mute. Apologies. Thank you very much. Great presentation. I just would like to check with you. I understand the reasons behind consolidating super accounts from a fees perspective. However, there is also the death and disability payments that are available through different super funds. So you actually get more death and disability payments by having more than one account. How does UniSuper feel about that?
UniSuper love you to have as much cover as you need to have, but let me just give you a little tip. So what a lot of people do, obviously you've got a superannuation fund that your super guarantee or your contributions are going into, and that's normally the one that your employer obviously is contributing. Now, if you've got multiple funds, you're right, you can have as many life and total and permanent disablement protection covers as you feel are necessary. What I would suggest, and what I know our advisors, this is not advice, by the way, I have to keep saying that, I'm not telling you to go and do this, but one of the strategies that we usually look at is how can you best make the monies in those other funds perform for you? Now, if you've got, and I'm just going to pull out an example here. So some people might have come into the sector and joined UniSuper, but they had $20,000 or $30,000 in, let's call it Australian super. But they've got really good life and total and permanent disablement cover there they don't want to lose. So what we normally do is say, calculate what your premiums are going to be until the time that you want that cover. So if that's to age 60 or age 65, what about how much do you need to leave in that other fund? And it will eventually just vanish. It'll eventually just be drawn down by paying those insurance premiums. But bring the remainder of your investment, so you've got the economies of scale that having a bigger fund in one high-performing fund can return for you. So if you've got 2 or 3 funds with great insurance cover, you can keep them, but just keep enough money there to cover you for the years that you want to keep that protection. And roll everything else so you've just got one that's kind of your investment fund and the others that are your insurance backup. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. That's great.
Excellent.
Fantastic. Thanks. There are no further people with their hands up in the participants list. So we might now pass, Theresa, to the questions. There are a couple in chat if you're able to access those. If not, I can get Helena to read them.
I've got them here, so I'll just pace through them. A few people are asking about the slides, and absolutely. Look, I have to tell you, when I was putting these slides together, I could have done 50 slides. There's so much topic and information, and it does get complex. And I did say to Helena when I first started, I said, look, I'll PDF these and send them out so you don't have to try and remember it all, you know, or try and think, well, I remember one thing and that's what I'm going to do. So I'll get them PDF'd, and I believe the recording will also be available. So that will be sent out from the NTEU. There's some questions here also about, the recording's been asked. The DB member, I think I've answered that. When you make non-concessional contributions, it does go to the accumulation component. However, when you make your what's called your member contribution, and the one thing I would say to DB members, please check if you are making your member contribution in a pre-tax or a post-tax environment. The default is post-tax. So you could still be paying 7% post-tax, which means you're actually paying tax on it rather than paying for it out of your pre-tax dollars, which will see your take-home pay increase. So please just double check that. What does your pension look like? I think that question we've answered. Seeing super sits in the stock market, are there options to build in less stock market dependence? Absolutely. So this is where you can actually choose to go to property, you can choose to go to cash, you can choose to go to bonds. So they are what we call sector options. Now, if you go onto your employer online, and again, as I said, I could have put 50 slides up to explain all of these concepts. If you go into Employer Online and click your investments tab, which is on the left, and for those of you that aren't UniSuper members, all super funds would have a similar function available. You can see how you are actually invested. In fact, you can even see the top shares that you are invested in and the percentage and dollar value of how much you own of certain companies, which is pretty exciting sometimes. Now, if you look at that and you feel that you just don't want to be exposed to either some of those investments, and by that I mean those stocks and those companies, and we're seeing that a little bit with a real shift to, I guess I'll call it the green investments, so the environmental type investments. So you can actually go in and control that. But we have mixed options, which most of you would be in, and that's where we allow our Chief Investment Officer, John Pearce, who we love, to just go and put all the investment packages together and then manage it. Or you can go into what's called sector options. So if you're concerned about the stock market, go and look at the sector options and make some decisions accordingly. But again, I would encourage you to speak to someone before you do that. I'm sorry, that DBQ you should take into account whether you might be swapping fee. Okay, that's a really good question. So, sorry.
Oh, I was just wondering if I could ask a question in a minute. I can't find the hand up button. I'm sorry.
Okay,
I'm very experienced,
that's all right, Carol.
but just go with that one there first.
No, Carol, you go.
Oh, okay, yes. I'm not used to Zoom either, so couldn't find any hands anyway. Obviously, when you're in a higher income bracket and you reach that threshold pretty quickly with your employer contributions and your own, switching to post-tax contributions to put in extra seems to be the only real option. Is that right?
It is, yes. Well, it is and it isn't. It depends if you are comfortable. What would happen if you pay more than your cap? And again, not advice. And again, I'd speak to someone about how this would impact you. One of our people can actually calculate, you know, your specific circumstance. So what happens if you exceed the cap is at tax time, you literally just pay the tax that you would have paid had you taken it in salary. And there is also a small fine. Now, you need to calculate, is that fine more than what I've actually been able to get in returns through my super fund? So a lot of people get pretty antsy about, oh, I can't pay a fine, when I sit there sometimes and I think to myself, wow, we've been returning 17% this year. I mean, this year's been a phenomenal year in super. Now, you know, current performance is not an indicator of future performance. But you've got to weigh these things up, Carol, because the other way is you can, of course, take the funds, pay the tax, and then contribute it in a post-tax environment. And the maximum you can contribute in a given year is $110,000 into super.
Well, yes, I keep going over the cap and therefore having to pay an extra bit. I hadn't noticed I was paying a fine, maybe I am. So I've just switched to doing post-tax contributions only.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I don't know whether that's the best option.
Go and speak to someone, Carol, and again, they can calculate it on your particular circumstance, because we won't get into that here. But it does depend on the dollars over, and it is definitely worth speaking to someone. And as I said, you know, our super consultants are exceptionally highly skilled people. It's part of being a member with UniSuper. There's no cost at all for that service, and we're on every campus. So, yeah.
I have chats regularly. I have to say I still find it double Dutch to a certain extent, but you know, that's my confession.
Well, that concerns me, because I keep pushing. We've got to speak language. This is what's happening in Australia. This is why finance literacy is where it's at, because professionals keep talking to people. I use the washing machine repairman as an example. If I rang to get my washing machine fixed, I don't want him to talk me through it. I want him to come and either show me or fix it. So, you know, you need to, if you're not understanding it, you need to find someone who can explain it in your language.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Very, very good. Is there anybody else who's struggling with the hands up function who would like to ask a question before we move back to the questions in chat? Okay, I can't see any hands up and no one's shouted out, so I might go back to you, Theresa, to answer questions in the chat.
Okay, so there's one here that says, I've heard that when deciding about DB accumulation, you should take into account whether you might be swapping between part-time and full-time throughout your career. Can you explain why that is? So The defined benefit is actually formula based. And what will happen is, as you move into perhaps a part-time role, your service fraction, so the part of that formula that indicates whether you're a full-timer, or let's call it a 0.5 as a part-timer, will actually reflect that. But what I really want to emphasize here, it's an average. So it doesn't go from being a 0.1 and you're getting all of, you know, your formulas full benefits to overnight because you've gone part-time. It doesn't just drop to a half. And it's the same with your salary. When you go to part-time, the salary component stays as if you were a full-time equivalent. So that's a bit of a misdemeanor that the defined benefit is not beneficial to people that are moving between part-time and full-time and, you know, time out of the workforce. It will reflect what your salary has contributed to the defined benefit. And of course, one of the benefits of the defined benefit is you're not exposed to the market at all. It will just keep moving in line with the formula, regardless of what the market does. It's not for everyone, and it's something that you need to make a decision around, but it is a misdemeanor that it's not because you're going to be moving in and out of part-time work that you are disadvantaged. I hope that answers that one. So we've got a few more here. If you're still working, is there some way to switch out from defined benefits into accumulation? I wasn't given the choice back in '98, though, my employer. Okay, so we do have some members who found themselves in the defined benefit. And of course, as you'd be aware, the rule of the defined benefit scheme is once you pass your 2-year opt-out window, you will have to remain in it. The only way to exit the defined benefit past that window is that you actually have resigned from your employer. So, which isn't the best way to leave the defined benefit, but unfortunately that's the rule of the fund. The defined benefit is designed to, I guess, support all members of the defined benefit scheme. And so funds are invested based on what the future is expected to look like based on the members that are in there. So if members were exiting in and out all of the time, it just would not work. It's the way all defined benefit schemes are set up. So I am sorry that you have found yourself in there, but look, we've got a lot of changes happening at UniSuper, so just keep your eye out. Who knows what might happen in the future, but right now, unfortunately, you're there. The difference between accumulation 1 and accumulation 2 is pretty simple. It's pretty much one number. The only way to get to accumulation 2 is that you must have joined the defined benefit and opted out, and you end up in accumulation 2. Accumulation 1 is normally the pathway taken by our casuals. However, anybody joining the sector after the 1st of November, just gone, will also now be an accumulation 1 member. That is now the default rather than the defined benefit. The accumulation 1 also does have a few nuances with insurance cover, but you can just apply to get the level of insurance that you would like for your circumstances.
Theresa appears to have dropped out. Oh no, she's there. We've only got a couple more minutes to go, so perhaps time for one more question.
We apparently, what was that, sorry?
I think he dropped out for a second. We've got a couple more minutes to go, so perhaps there's time for
one question. Okay, so what I will say about renewable investments is that UniSuper as a super fund has the highest investment in I guess what we call it ESG, environmental and social governance investments. There is a booklet which you may find very interesting on our public website about climate. So please go and have a look for that booklet. If you think it's of any value, I could send a link to that along with the PDF if that makes it easier for others that may have that question as well, just to make it easier so you don't have to go and look for it.
I think that'd be great.
Gosh, here's a big one. When retirement comes around, is there any hope for those of us who are not likely to ever be in a position to own a home? That is a really challenging question, and it's a question that I guess I would say, you know, home ownership is obviously what we all aspire to have, especially in retirement. What I would say is the more that you can actually, I guess, adopt some of the things that we've been talking about here today to increase your superannuation, the more, I guess, choices you're going to have as to how you would be able to live in retirement. If renting is going to be something you're going to be needing to doing throughout your retirement, clearly the more funds you start with to support that, and obviously then go along and get some government benefits by way of some age pension to join that, and rent subsidies, that would be the only way I could actually suggest that that's going to help you. But, you know, it's something that is difficult, I know. But as I said in the evaluation, the more control you can have over your lifestyle once retirement comes.
Fantastic. Thanks. I think that means we're almost out of time, but I'd like you all to join me in thanking Theresa, particularly in helping answer questions from the chat. That's absolutely fantastic. I get the sense that there's lots more questions that are popping up, and people are really interested in this topic. So we will certainly look at, I suppose, working with UniSuper to run more of these kind of sessions, since people seem to get so much out of them. So thank you everyone for attending for our first event of our Bluestocking week. We'd really, I suppose, like you to do two things before you go, and that's to get more involved with your branch to help organise around, I suppose, issues of equity and how we advance the cause of women across our universities, and also to ask your colleagues to join the union. When we join together, the more of us that are involved and engaged, the more impact we have in ensuring that our workplaces are equitable, and that, you know, our working conditions, I suppose, reflect the interests of staff and students. So thanks everyone for coming along today for our first event of this Bluestocking week. And thanks once again to Theresa for that excellent presentation. And thank you all for your engagement. It's lovely to see all of you are here today. Take care, everybody, and we'll share those PowerPoint slides and whatever. And lovely to see Kathy Rittmeister knitting away. So take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
And hope to see you at future events. See you all. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.